Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland, and in this edition, we're going to be reviewing the Logitech Driving Force H-pattern shifter. Now, this shifter has only cost $55. Now, at that price point, can this shifter actually give you some H-pattern shifting satisfaction? Well, we're going to put it through the Sim Racing Garage review process and find out. So let's get to it. Now for our closer look segment on the Logitech H-pattern shifter. First off, when you first pull this out of the box, it's very, very light and doesn't give you the impression that it's built to take a lot of abuse. But again, and I'll probably be saying this a lot when I'm looking at this, for the price point of $55, yeah, I think my expectations are being met here. I wasn't really expecting to see something that was, that was made of metal, even though the shifter is metal in here, and I'm pretty sure there's probably some pot metal type things inside, but we'll actually get to that part when we get to the look inside segment. But first off, let's look at the top of it. We've got the big G for Logitech, of course, and they call this the Driving Force H shifter. It's a shame it didn't come with my wheel and pedals. It's something I had to get separate, even though you can order this in a kit where you get the wheel and the pedals also. But I got my wheel and pedals beforehand, so that's why I ended up just getting this. But the shifter itself has got a nice boot on it. I do like this boot. It's leather. It's actually real leather. If you smell it, you can actually, it survives the leather sniff test. And the handle is also stitched. You can see the stitching on it there. Not the best stitching in the world. If you look at the, a little closer there, you can see it does have a little bit of ragginess on it, but again, not that bad for what we paid for it. Not too bad. And of course, the way it's tucked in around this cap could be a little better. But it is leather, so it gives you that nice feel if you don't use gloves when you're actually driving, and when you're actually shifting this thing, it does feel like a shifting knob. I guess that's what it's supposed to feel like, and it doesn't feel like much more. And of course, the whole shifting action here, while we're actually doing that, is pretty light. Now, I have to say though, it does have a good pop when it goes into the gear. It actually is, and I'm not sure, I've seen some guys using these on some older videos that it didn't seem like it was popping that well into the gear. It was always, you could actually tap it real easy and it would pop back out. But I think that might vary also from unit to unit, or from example to example of this unit, depending on the tolerances they use in the manufacturing. But this one actually seems to feel pretty good when you're just holding in your hand. Of course, when you actually have it attached to the rig and you're driving, it's a whole different story. But at least when you're holding in your hand, it feels good there. The gates inside, I'm not sure if they're metal or they're plastic, but they do have a good grip on the shifter once you actually have it in that gate and go sideways with it. It's not like I can bend anything in there. It feels like it's pretty stiff, so that's a good indication that it's all metal inside of here as far as this assembly, but we'll see. We have the little locking dealios here, and obviously this is to clamp to your desk. And you just screw this in, just like the other Logitech stuff, like on their wheel, and this will raise or lower this knobby here, and then when you have it tight, you push it in and spin it a little bit and it'll lock down out of your way. Pretty simple system they have here. It's just a rod. You can see the threaded rod in there with a nut on the bottom here to secure the whole assembly, and you're just obviously screwing that. It's just riding the threads up and down, kind of like a worm gear, if you will. All right, and we also have this piece here that will keep, when you have this mounted to your desk and you're shifting and you just have these two pieces here connecting to it and you have these tight, it tends to, on this, right in this axis in here, it tends to want to rock on you a little bit. So they've added this that you can actually run up against the desk also, as long as you don't have anything thinner than this, which turns out to be a little less than an inch. So if you have a thinner board or desk that you're mounted to, this actually is not going to do you any good. Maybe you could put another piece of wood under there or something to close the gap. I'm sure you could figure something out to make it work. But it does help. I've had it mounted before, and it does help with that twisting motion when you're really in here hammering on the shifter. And I've actually driven this shifter, and I was hammering on it pretty good, and it's so far so good. It hasn't broken. And I was almost wondering if it would or not. So again, so far so good. It didn't break. When you have it mounted to a rig, and I'll show you that in the driving segment, it is a little vague when you're using these shifts, especially the shift, for me anyway, going from second gear over here over to third gear. A lot of times when I first got this on my rig, I was hitting the fifth gear instead when I was sure that it was I was putting it where third should be. But after a while, just like anything else, you got used to it, and it ended up not missing the third gear like I was at first. At first, I was actually a little bit frustrated until I was going, man, come on, man. I don't know where fifth is. I mean, I don't know where third is. I keep hitting fifth. Anyway, but that works out with experience, like so many of these peripherals when we get them in hand and we're actually using them for a while. We have a little ring here with the screws on it that will actually come off and give us access inside to at least some of the insides of this shifter, but we'll look at that later again. And anything else to show you here? It's got a little clamp on the back here. This part of it, you can see it's actually not attached to this housing here. It's its own unit, which may be good because maybe they're actually taking this part of it and screwing it into maybe a thin metal plate or something inside. But we'll see. And yeah, there's not a whole lot to see other than you do have an option of mounting this with screws. These are M6 screw holes, or threaded for M6 screws, so you should not have a problem getting it mounted to something like a aluminum plate or something. Just come up underneath with the bolt, and there you go. This is a 9-pin, which is typical for the Logitech systems, this little 9-pin plug. And I actually plugged this in with a Leo Bodner converter where it takes it and converts it to USB, so I can just run it on my rig without having to take my other steering wheel off and steering system off and put the Thrustmaster, or rather the Logitech, back on. So that's a lifesaver, and I'm actually going to do a review on that later on. A very nice little accessory to have if you have a shifter like this and you want to run it with a different wheel. Works like a charm, as you would expect coming from Leo Bodner. Yeah, not a whole lot else to see here in the closer look, but now we can get to the fun part though, where we're actually going to take it apart as usual and do the look inside submix. So we'll be able to see exactly what makes this thing tick once we get inside of it. All right, now let's go ahead and start pulling this puppy apart so we can see how it works. Now the first thing I'm going to do here is, and there's probably 10 different ways to start doing this, is obviously just pull this little piece of plastic out so it doesn't get in my way. Let it sit over there, and if it won't roll all the way off the table, let's do it that way. All right, so this is really easy to take off. It's really not that hard. All you need is a 10 mil wrench, basically. I have one of those over here, and what we're going to do is pull this nut off first, this threaded rod, or very long threaded bolt, if you will. So we'll go ahead and do that, and you just gotta, it really comes off pretty easy. It doesn't have to be on real tight apparently to work. So once I have that off, then we have this long threaded rod that we're gonna have to get out of this. And I can see already that there's a nut in the bottom of that capturing that rod, which lets it move up and down. It looks like there's probably gonna be one on top also. Yeah, it looks like it there. I don't know how you can see that, but there's one also on top. So that allows the screw to pull it up and down. Let's go ahead and unscrew that real quick. Try to do this as quick as I can so you guys don't have to sit here too long. Once I get the bottom one, yeah, there we go. See, once I get the bottom one disengaged off this threaded rod, then I can pull that assembly out. But the other nut that was in here is still on the rod, so we got to pull that off. So I just put my finger down on top of that nut in there and just go ahead and spin it out. That way the nut's not spinning. And it comes out pretty quick. If you spin it by the threaded rod and not try to do it over here, it spins a lot quicker. And there we go. There's the other nut. There's our threaded rod. So you want to make sure, by the way, when you put this back together, that you have both of these nuts in here. When you start threading this back in, when you have it sitting in the channel and you put it back together over here, like this, and they will fall out, so you got to be careful. And yeah, just I would just press it all the way at the top like that with one finger, so the top one can't get out, it's captured, and just start threading it from there. Once you engage both nuts, you're good to go. So we'll go ahead and set this over here and do the same thing to the other side. 10 mil nut. Once you get it loose, just grab it with your fingers off, And then we'll go ahead and do the same thing to this clamp. And as I'm taking this apart, I'm thinking, I know there's some mods out there for this shifter, and I'm thinking about, here's the nut on the other one, using them or doing them now that I'm seeing things as I take it apart, and I know the mods that are out there for this. So let's go ahead and get this last 10mm nut off this rod. There we go. Rod's out. We're ready to go. Actually, I'm going to put this back in here so I keep it all together. All right. So now our rod's out of the way. The next thing I want to get out of the way is, well, we might as well go ahead and pull the shifter off, I guess. Now, this is very easy to do. It's just a little plastic cap on here, kind of a cheapy unit. You can just get your fingernail under there if you have fingernails, and kind of just pop it off like that. It comes right off. So you can see the tabs in there, or rather the holes for the tabs on this that are sitting in there. So yeah, pretty easy to take that off. Then, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you can see it. There's a Phillips screw in there, holding it to the metal shaft. So what we're going to do is take my handy driver here and just pull that out real quick. There you go. The whole thing comes out together. Go ahead and grab my screw so I don't lose it. Put our knob over there. And yeah, just a regular Phillips screw there. And it does have some blue Loctite, so that means that they have some issues before. Maybe this coming loose and now they're using Loctite, or maybe they always did, but it's a good idea to use it. And of course, this is a machine thread because it's going into a metal rod there. So it's easy to identify that screw. Probably the only machine screw we're going to see in this plastic unit. So now let's go ahead and pull this ring off. And that is a 2.5mm. And I happen to have one of these drivers here for that. And I'm going to speed this up so you guys don't have to sit here and watch me do this forever. Right. So now all we got to do is pull this ring off. And it comes off very easily. It slides off real easy. There's nothing really to look at here except you can see the leather done inside there where they've glued it to the ring. And there's a plastic little grommet in here that rides up and down the shaft instead of the leather. And of course they've glued the leather to that also. Right. Put that aside, and now we can see some of what's going on inside the shifter. All I'm seeing is a lot of plastic at the moment with like a steel rod through the middle there, but we'll get a better look once we get closer to this. And while I'm looking at this ring, I just noticed, and I meant to show you this, you see that tab in the top here? There's a tab right here. There it is, sticking up. That's the back locator tab that will go in this back hole where there's actually a screw down in there too. So that lets you not get it misoriented, because you can put this on. It's because of the curve on it. I don't know if you guys can see that curve that well, but there's actually a curve there that matches the curve or the radius of the top of this housing. Anyway, so you don't want to put it on backwards. Right, so we still have some screws on the top here to get to, and there's 3 of them. I don't know how well you can see them in there, but they're in these deep holes here. Right there. And I think you see that top one right in here. So I got one over here, and again one over there. Right. So we'll go ahead and I'll see if those are the skinny ones, aren't they? Yeah. So I'm gonna have to change back over to my skinny Phillips and long one so it reaches down and holds well. And go ahead and get those out. This is where the little light comes in handy on this thing, because then it lets you look down in the hole and get oriented on the screw properly before you take it out, because the last thing you want to do is strip one of these screws down in this plastic, because you pretty much screwed the pooch when you did that. So again, just the typical plastic screw that you'll see with the aggressive wood-like screw threads on it. Little Phillips head. Right. Get those other 2 out of it, and then we'll be on to the bottom. Kind of hard to see in there sometimes. There it goes. Probably the most difficult part is getting down to those screws that are down in the deep recesses of these kind of housings. Right. Of course, it's still not going to come apart because we got some stuff on the bottom to do. And we have 2 screws here. And we also have a couple of screws in these slots right here. I don't know if you can see it in there, but anyway, there's two of the same kind of screws in there, so we're gonna have to get all four of those out. So we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so now this whole piece here comes out as one unit. And it has just comes right off like that. Very simple. And it doesn't look like, because of the screws we pulled out of here on this bottom, I said before in the closer look I was hoping there was going to some metal plate in there to help reinforce this when it's clamping on the bottom of a table. But yeah, it looks like it's just plastic, because I can tell by the screw thread it's not a machine screw that goes in metal. And there you have it. Not much to see here. Just another piece of plastic. Right. So now that we have that off, we have a couple more things we got to do, or one more thing we got to do. I think we're all at the top. Yep, we just got 4 over here to undo. And they're kind of a bigger Phillips head, so I have to change my bit real quick. And then we'll go ahead and get those 4 screws out. Okay, so we've got all of our screws out, and they're just some black Phillips heads with the plastic thread, or groove rather, for gripping plastic. Okay, now this thing should come straight away apart, I'm thinking. Yep, no hot glue or anything in it. Let's get our shifter straight. And it should just come right out. And there it is. Okay. And of course, this is just the usual injection molded plastic stuff that we see so much in this industry. Actually, this has got some little rubber pieces here, and I'm trying to think of what that's for, unless the shifter can go that far over to the sides. Maybe it is, and keep it quiet. We'll see that once we put it back on. Right. All right, so here we have the assembly, and we can see we got a breakout board with a couple plugs in it. We've got some plugs down here. And when we move this shifter around, if I keep from dropping it, you can see there's, if I'm in the middle, I'm going straight up to, let's see, that'd be 3rd. In the middle all the way back is 4th. And then we'll go over to the sides to get 1st, 2nd, over the other sides to get 5th and 6th. Now, when I was doing the closer look section of this review, I was actually noticing that it felt like it was going against metal, and I wasn't sure how this was actually engaging and working. But I can see now that's why I was feeling that, because what we have here is obviously the main shaft, and through that main shaft in this nylon piece here, we've got another piece of metal, and it's got some flanges on it. Oh, you can see that. See little heads on them on each side of it. And on each side of these plates, we've got some holes cut into it, or patterns, if you will, not really just round holes. And I'll show you this one over here. See how that pattern is? It's kind of got a cut on the top part of it up there, and then flatter on the middle. And this one over here, same kind of thing, except down on the middle you can see there's actually another cut down here in this plate that's actually lower than the one that's going on the top of it. So that is for reverse. What happens is these little round heads here, these little flanges, you see it that way. If I push this down and go to reverse, I'm pushing down on that spring, and then I'm going over and I'm pulling back. And so that flange is now captured by the metal plate here. So that will hold the pressure to keep it down in reverse, and just keep it in reverse until we move it. So that's what that extra slot is for. Now I'm going to go ahead and just push it back up and release it, and you can see it snaps back up. Now when I lean over or push over the shifter to get 5th or 6th, you can see that flange is going in the slot again, and if I go into 6th, which is back, you can see it catches there. And it actually has a spring tension on this whole assembly here, up and down. The internal spring down there is keeping it pushed up. So that gives you that locked in feeling that I was feeling before, that it's not popping out real easy or anything. So you've got to put some oomph on it to get it to pop out. And then if we go get 5th, the same thing happens. The opposite way, it goes in and grabs the plate on that side. And of course, the same thing is going to happen over here for 1st and 2nd. So pretty simple actually what they've done here. but it seems to be pretty effective. It's got metal where it needs to, it looks like, and I really can't see anything I'm thinking that would cause this to not have a decent life cycle for the price, except for if you look down in here, these two metal plates. Now this whole rod obviously is rotating on a pivot point down in here, and we'll actually take a look at that, because you see when it's rotating back and forth, it's actually pivoting inside that metal plate, and you can see that plastic piece there that's an extension of this bottom piece of the plastic, and that's rotating in there. I'm sure that it just has some grease in there. There's no bearings or any of that stuff in there, just pretty much a friction fit kind of thing with grease in it. Now there's also, when we're shifting back and forth, the notch that we're getting when we're in the middle, and which also is happening when we go over to the side and get our first or second or fifth or sixth, whatever the case may be, is provided by a spring ball capture system that we see in so many of these systems. And I'm trying to show you the hole here. You can see one of the holes right back in here. See that hole? And there's another hole next to that and another hole. So there's 3 total holes. So we're in the center hole right now. And this plastic piece back here has actually captured has a spring in here that's captured by a ball bearing that's sitting in this grooves. Now when you take this apart, I'm pretty sure that ball bearing and spring will come out, so that's something to be mindful of if you ever get to a point where you want to do that. Excuse me. So yeah, that's pretty much how it's all working. And the only, like I said, I'm not sure how without having some kind of ball bearing support in there, how long that is going to last. But yeah, I don't know how many failures a lot of guys are getting out. I know they do fail, but again, I'd rather see some kind of a metal piece in there to give this thing a longer life cycle. Let's get to the electronics. It's just very simple here. A couple of pots. We got a pot here, and we got a pot over here on this side. So we know when it's going this way, and we know when it's going this way. Actually, jumping around here. So we know it's rotating that way. This pot is turning, and we're going front and backwards. The pot over here is turning. And of course, it's all wired into the breakout board that's going out of our cord and then into the wheelbase, where it gets converted to the USB signals coming from the wheelbase to our PC or to our PS4 or Xbox, depending on what you're using. By the way, this is not compatible with PS3, I understand, from what I'm reading on this thing. So I'm not sure. You would think it was, compatible with the PlayStation 4. It would be backwards compatible, but apparently it's not, according to what the instructions are saying on the site. So pretty much that's it in a nutshell, right? Pretty simple. Again, wasn't expecting any groundbreaking parts in here as far as bearings and things like that, and it pretty much is what you see. It is what it is, as they say, at this price point. Suppose basically it works though, and it does actually not too shabby a job as far as the feel of it. It feels better than I thought it would when I bought it, because I know a lot of people complain it doesn't feel that great. But then again, like I said before in the other segment, yeah, once we get this mounted though, and we're actually driving it, yeah, that all changes, because then everything is nice and solidly mounted, and then this click that I'm feeling now is probably going to fade away pretty quick, and I'm probably not going to be able to feel it very much. But it is, one good thing is we've got metal to metal here to lock it in gear. So yeah, I like that part of it. All right, so yeah, not much else to see here. All we got to do now is put this puppy back together, and then we'll go ahead and mount it to the rig and do some driving video and see what we think about it. Okay, so here we are in iRacing in the Lotus 79 with the Sebring track. Yeah, this is Sebring. This is my favorite combination, as you guys probably well know by now, for testing gear. Right, so let's get right to the shifter. First off, this shifter, once it's hard mounted and you're using it, the clicks or the detents that you feel when you're actually just holding it in hand, like when I was doing the review, kind of fade away a little bit. They're not as tactile as they were before you started using the shifter. In fact, it was kind of vague, and it took me a few laps to get where I was able to get my muscle memory to where it knew where third and fifth was, because I kept going for third and hitting fifth instead when I first set it up. But that's to be expected when you're coming from another type of shifter and you're trying to use another one, especially one with less tactile feedback. But again, just like anybody else, once you use it enough, your muscle memory will be there, so you really start hitting the shifts and you don't miss very many at all. Other than that, it's it's a $55 shifter. We have to keep our expectations at the correct levels for this, and it does shift. And the good thing about this is the metal plates, if you saw the look inside, the way it's engaging the flanged end of the rod in those slots does give it a good feel once it's in gear. Once you finish that gear shift, it feels solid enough that you don't think it's going to spring back out or anything, and you don't have to worry about that. So you can actually, when I'm actually doing this, I'm going to let you guys, as usual, see some of this as I'm driving without me talking. You'll hear me hammering that shifter pretty good, and yeah, it did fine. It really did. I don't see anything really wrong with this shifter. I can't say too many bad things about it, because again, we have to realize that this is the market segment this is intended for. At $55 shipped is really the very entry-level type market, and for the price, it's really not a bad little shifter. I don't think. I think it just gets the job done. It allows you to have an 8 shifter next to your wheel where normally you wouldn't, at a pretty good price actually. And it's not going to obviously impress many people who have higher end 8 shifters, but really that's not what this shifter is all about. And if you're just getting into sim racing and you want to get a wheel and shifter set, or you already have a wheel and you're just looking for an 8 shifter, then yeah, it really wouldn't hurt you to give it a try. In fact, it's such a cheap little shifter as far as cost is concerned, that if you didn't like it, you could always turn around and sell it for $40 and not lose very much just for the experience of having used it. But yeah, I really can't dog this shifter too much because of the price point and what it's really intended to be used for. And yeah, if you're in the market, in that type of market for a shifter, then yeah, you might as well give it a shot. You really can't, you don't really have much to lose here. And again, it's a competent little shifter. It gets the job done. As you can see, I'm shifting through the gears without too much trouble. And yeah, we'll just leave it at that. It is what it is. And I'll let you guys watch me drive a little bit more before we get over to the final thoughts. And if you don't want to wait till then, just hop on over and I'll see you with the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the Logitech Driving Force H-pattern shifter. Now, I would consider this unit as an entry-level H-pattern shifter, and because of this, expectations should be managed accordingly. With a mostly plastic construction except for the shifter shaft and the metal plates that are used as shifting gates, you're not going to get a lot of tactile feedback from this shifter. But I think you can get enough to be able to make consistent shifts. That is, once you have had some time with it and your muscle memory has been able to map the pattern properly. Then you can just get on with making shifts when you need to. And that's all this shifter was designed to do. I think for the price point, really, this is a competent little shifter and worth a look if you're just getting into sim racing or just a casual sim racer who just likes to have some fun driving once in a while. I bought this shifter off of Amazon for $55 delivered, and really at this price I didn't have too much to complain about. I did wish that it had a bit more tactile feedback. And I will also be doing some mods to this shifter that promise to do just that. And I'll be getting a video out on it in the near future. So, if you're looking for adding a bit of H-pattern fun to your driving games, then this is a good way to see if it's something that you think you really want to do. And if you don't like an H-pattern shifter, then it's a good way to find out without spending too much money. And you could always resell it and get some of that hard-earned money back. I'm Barry Rowland, and thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and help support the SRG by visiting our website at simracinggarage.com.